All right, ready to dive into something interesting.
Always.
Today we're tackling total quality management. But don't worry, we're going way beyond the surface level. No death by PowerPoint here.
I'm with you there.
We're going to uncover the good stuff. Like, did you know this whole TQM thing? Well, it's got a history that's way more interesting than you might think. Think Japan, post-World War II, not just some American factory floor.
Now, that's a curveball I wasn't expecting, but I like where this is going.
And the best part, we're going to break down how the core principles of TQM can actually help you, even if you're not running a Fortune 500 company.
Now, that's what I call a valuable deep dive. Let's get into it.
Totally. Get ready for some serious aha moments.
You know, whenever I hear the term TQM, it's like people assume we're talking about factories and assembly lines, but it's so much bigger than that.
It's funny you say that because a lot of people get caught up thinking TQM is just about catching defective products.
Right. But it's really about this constant pursuit of improvement, always getting better. Imagine baking a cake and it comes out perfect, not just once, but every single time. That's the essence of what we're talking about, that constant striving for excellence.
So it's less about fixing problems and more about creating systems that prevent them from happening in the first place.
Now you're getting it. It's about continuously asking, how can we make this even better? And that applies to any field, really. We could be talking about tech startups or hospitals, even your local bakery. The principles are surprisingly universal.
Okay, so we're talking about a journey, not a destination. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit. Where did this whole TQM thing even come from? Like, is there an origin story, a founder? Give us the historical context.
Oh, there's definitely a history here, and it's more interesting than your average textbook. It actually started back in the early 1900s with a guy named Walter Schuhart.
Sure. Okay, so he's like the OG of quality control.
You could say that. While he doesn't always get the recognition he deserves, he really set the stage for everything that followed. But to get to the TQM we know today, we have to fast forward a bit to post-World War II, Japan.
Now, that's what I call a plot twist.
Yeah.
Japan. What happened there?
They were rebuilding, right? And in the process, they became obsessed with quality.
Wow, that's kind of amazing to find that kind of focus on quality emerging from such a challenging time.
It really is, and that's where the story gets even better. Two figures were instrumental in bringing this whole quality movement to the West. Joseph Juran and the one and only W. Edwards Deming.
Oh yes, Deming. He's like the rock star of the TQM world. His work had a huge impact. What made his approach so different, so revolutionary?
Deming understood that quality wasn't about catching defects after they happened. It was about building systems that prevented those defects in the first place. A total shift in mindset from inspection to prevention.
So instead of playing whack-a-mole with defects, Deming was all about designing a better molehill, or maybe even getting rid of the molehill altogether. That's some seriously forward-thinking stuff.
Absolutely. He was way ahead of his time. And that idea that quality is an ongoing process, not a destination, it's incredibly relevant today, especially as we dig into the 8 core principles of TQM.
All right, enough history lesson for now. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. These 8 principles are those like the actionable steps, the tools to make this whole TQM thing actually work.
You got it. Think of them as the building blocks for achieving real, lasting quality improvement.
Okay, let's hear them. What's the first principle?
First up, we've got customer focus.
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. But I'm guessing it goes deeper than just saying the customer's always right.
You're right on the money. It's not just about saying it, it's about living it. Customer focus in TQM means really understanding your customer's needs, even anticipating what they'll want, and then consistently exceeding those expectations. When companies nail this, it can completely change their game.
I bet. Got any examples of a company that's really used this customer focus to up their game?
One of the best examples is Toyota and their Kanban system. It's a perfect example of TQM in action.
I've heard of Kanban, but how does it connect to this idea of customer focus?
Imagine a car manufacturing plant where every single part of the process is synced up, no wasted time or materials, everything running smoothly. That's Kanban. Toyota used it to completely revolutionize how they made cars, becoming incredibly efficient and, most importantly, super responsive to what their customers actually needed and wanted.
So they were able to use their understanding of customer demand to streamline their entire production line.
Exactly, and here's the best part. This customer-centric approach didn't just make them more efficient, it actually helped them cut down on waste and storage costs. They became leaner and more profitable all at the same time. Now that's the power of true customer focus.
That's incredible. It's like customer focus becomes this engine for positive change, not just a box to check.
You said it better than I could have. And that actually leads us perfectly into our next principle, which focuses on the people inside the organization, employee commitment.
Okay, so we're not just talking about showing up on time and attending all the meetings, right?
Yeah.
What does real employee commitment look like in the TQM world?
It's about fostering a culture where everyone, from the top down, feels valued and empowered to contribute. Everyone's voice matters, not just the executives in the fancy offices.
Oh, tell me about it. I remember working at this one place. We had a suggestion box, the classic drop your ideas here thing. It was like a black hole. Nobody ever knew if anyone even looked at those suggestions, let alone actually tried to implement them. Talk about demotivating.
It's amazing how often that happens. But with TQM, it's the opposite. It's about creating systems where you're not just hearing those employee voices, but genuinely listening to them and, crucially, actually acting on that feedback. Imagine a restaurant where everyone, the chef, the servers, even the dishwasher, they all care deeply about the food and the experience they're creating for the customer. That's employee commitment in action.
I can only imagine what kind of positive ripple effect that creates. Happier employees, happier customers, just a better all-around experience.
It's a win-win for everyone involved. And speaking of winning, our next principle is all about continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement, okay. I mean, that one sounds like a no-brainer. Who doesn't want to get better at what they do?
You'd think so, but it's not always as simple as it seems. Continuous improvement, it's not about reaching some arbitrary finish line and just coasting. It's about accepting that there's always room to learn and grow, to refine your methods, to get better every single day. Think about training for a marathon. You don't just run once and call it good. It takes consistent effort, a willingness to adapt, and a whole lot of dedication. TQM, it's the same idea.
So you're never really done, are you? There's always something to tweak, something to improve, even when things are going well.
Exactly. Complacency is the enemy of progress. And on that note, let's move on to the next principle, process emphasis.
Process emphasis. Okay, I'll be honest, that one sounds a tad dry, maybe a bit intimidating. Am I about to be drowning in flowcharts and spreadsheets?
These can be helpful tools for sure, but the main idea here is much simpler than it might sound. It's all about recognizing that consistent quality, it comes from having well-defined, repeatable processes in place.
So like a recipe, if I want to bake a cake, I'm not just going to randomly throw ingredients together and hope for the best, right? A recipe gives me a clear set of steps to follow, a roadmap to that delicious end result.
You got it. It's the same idea. And just like with that cake recipe, even those steps that seem super obvious, they're crucial for making sure things are consistent every time. And importantly, they give you a framework for identifying any areas where you might be able to improve.
And when you've got that clearly documented process, you can start to analyze what's working, what's not, and then make those data-driven decisions we were talking about earlier. It's all connected.
You're catching on quickly. See, this is why I love TQM. It's all about understanding how these different elements work together. And that actually brings us to another principle, strategic big picture thinking.
Okay, strategic big picture thinking. I'm not going to lie, that one sounds a little more like something you'd expect from, I don't know, a CEO, someone way up in the corporate ladder. How does that apply to the rest of us? We're not all CEOs.
That's a common misconception. While strategic thinking is, of course, crucial for leadership at any level, it's just as valuable for everyone else. And I'd argue it's just as relevant to your personal life as it is to your work life.
Now you've got my attention. Tell me more about how this big picture thinking thing works.
Well, TQM, at its heart, it's a reminder that it's not about quick fixes or temporary solutions. It's about making sure your actions, your work, your goals, they're all aligned with the bigger picture, that long-term vision you have. Imagine you're building a house. You wouldn't want to build it on a foundation of sand, right? You'd want to make sure it's strong, solid, built to last.
That's a pretty solid analogy.
Yeah.
The strategic big picture thinking, it's about making sure all your efforts are moving you towards those long-term goals, building something that's sustainable and meaningful.
Exactly. You're building something that lasts, something with real impact. And speaking of building on solid ground, that leads us right into our next principle, data-driven decisions.
Now we're talking my language. I'm all about data. Tell me more about how it fits into the TQM puzzle.
This principle is about taking the guesswork out of the equation. Of course, intuition and gut feelings have their place, but sometimes the data tells a different story, reveals something you might have missed. Think of a sports team, right? They analyze game footage, study their opponents, they're looking at the stats, all to figure out how to up their game and improve their strategies. That's data in action.
Or a marketer tracking website traffic, trying to understand what's resonating with their audience, what's falling flat.
Uh-huh.
It's all about using those insights to make better decisions.
Exactly. And in the world of TQM, data is king. It helps you measure your progress, pinpoint areas that need attention, and most importantly, it lets you make objective decisions based on evidence, not just hunches. Data takes the emotion out of the equation.
It's like having that objective perspective, that reality check we all need sometimes.
Exactly. It keeps you grounded. And speaking of connections, that brings us beautifully to our next principle, system integration.
System integration. Okay. I'm not gonna lie, that one sounds a little intimidating. Like, are we about to get really technical here?
No need for alarm. At its core, system integration is really just about recognizing that a successful organization, any organization, it's not just a bunch of separate departments doing their own thing. It's more like an ecosystem.
Okay, I like that. An ecosystem. So everything has to work together.
Exactly. Everything is connected. For true quality to thrive, all those different parts, those departments, they need to work in sync, communicate, collaborate. Imagine a symphony orchestra, right? You've got all these different sections, the strings, the brass, the percussion, each with their unique sound. But it's only when they come together, when they play in harmony, following the conductor's lead, that you get the full impact, the magic of the music.
Okay, I'm with you. So you're saying that, like, in a business, if marketing is doing its own thing and sales is off on a different planet, that's not exactly a recipe for success?
You hit the nail on the head. When departments operate in silos, not talking to each other, no clear shared goals, it's chaos. It's inefficient, it's frustrating, and ultimately, the quality of whatever that organization is producing, it suffers. System integration is about breaking down those walls, getting everyone on the same page, working together towards that same end goal.
It's amazing how often communication breakdowns derail even the best laid plans. Speaking of which, reminds me of this one time I was trying to put together a bookshelf, and you'll never believe this, but the instructions were missing a step.
Oh no, I've been there. Did you ever get that bookshelf built?
Let's just say it involved a lot of creative problem solving. But hey, that's a perfect segue to our final TQM principle, right? Communication is king.
You know it. And you're right, it's not just about having instructions, it's about fostering a culture where communication flows freely at all levels. Everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas, their concerns, even their criticisms, all with respect, of course.
So it's that two-way street, not just top-down directives, but creating an environment where everyone's voice is heard, where feedback is valued, not just ignored or, even worse, punished.
Exactly. It's about trust and mutual respect. When you've got that foundation, that's when the real magic happens. The innovation, the breakthroughs, the continuous improvement we were talking about earlier, it all comes back to communication.
I love how all these principles connect. It's like this intricate dance. But before we wrap up, I want to bring it back to our listeners. We've talked a lot about how TQM applies to businesses, but what about our own lives? Can these principles help us be better parents, better partners, just better humans, even if we're not running companies?
Absolutely. That's what's so exciting about TQM. It's not just a business framework, it's a mindset shift, a way of approaching challenges and striving for excellence no matter what you're passionate about. Think about a goal you have, personal or professional, it doesn't matter. Are you setting clear objectives? Are you breaking down that big goal into smaller, more manageable steps? Are you seeking feedback, using data to track your progress?
It's like you said earlier, that idea of continuous improvement. It's not about being perfect. It's about always striving to be better.
Exactly. And that applies to everything. Your relationships, your hobbies, the way you approach a problem at work, it's all connected. TQM gives you the tools to think differently, to approach challenges with a focus on solutions and continuous improvement.
This has been fantastic. We've covered so much ground today, from the surprising history of TQM to those 8 powerful principles. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that TQM, it's not just some abstract concept. It's a practical roadmap for creating positive change in all areas of our lives. So, to our listeners out there, next time you're facing a challenge, big or small, remember the lessons of TQM. Ask yourself, how can I use these principles to approach this situation differently, to find a better way forward? You might be amazed at the results. And that's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep those TQM principles close at hand, and let's keep striving for excellence together.